Hi everyone, my name is James Feeney. Welcome to or back to my channel. Today I'm here with a VR to Becca Talks and Tarot, and it is let me get this right, My Tarot Growth, hashtag My Tarot Growth. So I have watched a bunch of these and been really fascinated with them. I think it's a really fun way to reflect on one's journey and growth through tarot, and so I thought I would chime in and share my own. Without further ado, I will get into the questions. And these are all things I really I may have answered at some points or other, but very sporadically and not touching upon them in much of an in-depth way in other videos. So this is a nice way to kind of have it in a concise, compact manner within one video for anybody who is curious and is just curious about watching these tags, which is something that I've been doing. So the first question is, how has your tarot journey evolved? And that's a pretty big and broad question, so I guess I'll just start from the beginning and try to work my way up into the present. So it started in the beginning of my college life or university, depending on where you're at in the world and how you reference that education. But it started during that time. I had, as many people do, moved away from home and moved to school, and I went to school in New York, and it was kind of like this overwhelming experience at first. Well, it was overall, but in a good way. But there were definitely aspects that were really overwhelming. There was so much going on, so many people, so many things, I don't know, happening at school, but both there and just being in the city and adapting to that lifestyle. And some of it was kind of isolating and difficult. And I remember needing to or wanting to actually, I'd kind of had a bit of a craft in terms of magic. I'd had a little bit of a magical practice, nothing too serious, but I wanted to do a spell and kind of just get back into and really enliven my magical practice. And so I was doing some research and I came across a shop called Enchantments. It's in New York, and if you've been there, you may have heard of it. I know that they're known for like their candles, these custom candles or spell candles that they do, I think it is. And so I decided one day that I was just going to go there after class and pick up some supplies or maybe some books on magic. And I got there and it was a lot to take in, especially as somebody who really didn't know much in a technical way at the time. And so I was browsing around the shop. I picked up a few books that really called out to me, got a few ingredients that seemed to be staples, and then I remember getting ready to check out and then seeing in the glass case that is the kind of checkout counter some tarot decks, and that really wasn't something I came to the shop for at all. It was something that, I don't know, I just never really considered. I'd seen, of course, in like pop culture and movies and things, and I just remember taking a minute, kind of pausing before choosing to pay for my stuff and really looking at the decks and kind of just feeling like I wanted to get one at the time. Why not? I was kind of really going in full force into my practice, and that seemed like something that would be fun and, I don't know, helpful in some way. I don't know really what I was looking for out of it as much as I just felt very called to it in the moment. I kind of just, I don't know, the whole moment just felt very, not overwhelming. It felt exciting just being there. And so I think, I don't know, I went for just a classic Rider-Waite-Smith deck, the checkered back one in the yellow box, and I got just the most basic tarot book, like one of those series of 101 books that they have for like magic and all sorts of things. So I got one of those and just went back to my dorm. I actually remember I kind of used and dug into the tarot deck and learning that more so than my magical practice in that moment. I kind of put the magical stuff to the side and set about reading the whole tarot book within that week. And then I would kind of flip through the cards, and it was like a flashcard sort of thing. And I really wanted to get down the meanings, and this book was actually perfect for that. And I still think it was probably the best way for me to go about learning, because it was not at all overwhelming or confusing. It didn't feel like there was too much going on. I never turned to the internet or any videos or online resources for the first few years, actually. Something in me just kind of felt like that wasn't the place to go. I kind of had this weird, I don't know, feeling maybe it was more of a, I don't know if it was like a stigma, just that things on the internet would feel very, I guess when I thought of YouTube, I thought of more of those popular channels that were very clickbait like, and people not really having much of substance to say. And so I thought that that is what would translate to all spheres of YouTube and all communities, just because I wasn't familiar with the online world as much and I kind of shied away from it. So I didn't at all seek out any online resources for like 3 or 4 years. And for the first year, actually, I only had that little 101 book, but I knew it by heart. And I just remember like reading for myself for the first few months, and then after I'd gotten the meanings and felt confident enough in them to be able to not touch a book while I was reading for myself, I started to have fun with my friends in the dorms and do little just like fun reading times at night where we would kind of like me and a friend or me and a few friends would gather together, and I would just give them a tarot reading and we would laugh, and there was nothing too serious about it, and it wasn't like I was investing so much energy in it in the way of just making it super helpful or serious. It was really just a fun experience in those months, I remember, and I would kind of just have it out on my desk and use it when it felt right. And that's really, for the majority of my experience in college, that's really how I went about using it, using the tarot for the first 2 or 3 years. And I slowly started to get a few more books on it just because it felt like that 101 book wasn't quite enough. I think it did have a list of suggested reading. And so it took a few years actually, or it took at least that first year before I got another book, and then started to realize there's more to this. This can go deeper than just these little surface level meanings that I had memorized and was kind of regurgitating in a fun way with my friends. And so I'm somebody who likes to read. I was in school for English literature, so I was kind of just like, I just kind of started my own little curriculum. I had like my chapters I needed to read each day for all these classes, and I almost kind of took it to where I would have my own set of chapters and books I was trying to get through in terms of tarot to expand upon that, because it felt like something where there was a lot of depth, and I really like to know the inner workings of and the systems and the history and all of the possibilities. So I took myself down the rabbit hole. I'm glad I didn't really discover the world of tarot tube and deck collecting at that time, because I think it would have really impeded my learning. I would have probably just, it would have plateaued, and I would have become more mesmerized with the images and the possibilities of depictions of cards in other decks and started to acquire, and I don't think that would have been helpful for me at the time. So I am glad in a way that I kind of was isolated during those years. And it was by like the third or fourth year when I started to actually collect decks, and it wasn't even after at that point I still hadn't really found tarot tube online at all, and I was still at that point I was doing more serious readings. They weren't for money, but I did do free readings for like acquaintances, and I was definitely more, I guess more serious about it, and I was using it more as a self-development and a guidance for myself at the time, especially during some darker periods throughout my life and the transformations that happen when you're in college and all of that. So that was really helpful, and at that point I was a lot more serious, and I started to acquire a few more decks just based on online research and seeing them on Amazon. And I think it was within a few months of that, so about maybe 4 years, because now I'm 6 years in. It was at about the 4-year mark that I first started to even discover there were videos by people, and I remember just watching for like the first few months, like the kind of like the biggest names that pop up when you search any topic. So I wasn't really seeing the full extent of the community and the depth and the content, the wonderful content. I wasn't seeing all of it, but that's when I started to slowly collect, and I definitely reached kind of this crescendo where I was going in and just buying so many decks, and I think that that's something that even up until recently I had kind of had this period of struggle with, so that was really interesting as well to kind of take note of in my path. And wow, this is a really long question, but how has it evolved? And then eventually, I think by the end of college, which was like around the 4-year mark, is when I started to make an Instagram and decide that I wanted to read for clients, just because I was reading for acquaintances so much. And some of my friends were like, oh, you could probably do this and make some money doing it for others. And so I made the Instagram and then decided that that was something I would do, and then slowly kind of worked my way into creating a website and creating a YouTube, which happened, was the website first or YouTube? I can't remember. And I wasn't consistent at all with YouTube at first. And this channel was actually a fashion channel in my early years in college. So I didn't even make a new channel. I just kind of took down those videos and started making this stuff. But I used it for fashion and lifestyle type stuff that I was really interested in and kind of still am. So that's interesting. But yeah, and so then I started kind of reading for clients. I remember in the beginning I would have a bunch of sets of free readings where I would do free readings online for others via Skype and email and some in person, and that was really valuable experience. And then after a few months of that, I started to charge for my readings, and of course during all of this time I was still using tarot for myself, and that kind of changed in that I would experiment more, I think, in the beginning, and then started to understand how I liked to use the tool of tarot more as I guess I became acquainted with my path. I still really relish the idea of using the cards for all sorts of different things, not just self-reflection or guidance. It's fun to use them in a more fortune-telling and forecasting way. I still love to engage in that. I still love to just study a card, to use it for meditation, to use it to unravel a thought, to ask me a question. So these are all things that I think I still really enjoy from tarot, that I enjoyed in the beginning, which I think is beautiful. And then I guess that kind of brings us to the present where I'm at with this channel and my practice overall. And I'm really happy with its evolution. So very, very, very long story, not made so short. That is how my tarot journey has evolved. Now, what was the first deck I ever bought? I have it right here. I keep it now in this leather sort of pouch, and it's just that blue checker back Rider-Waite-Smith. It's kind of in a reversal sort of way. With Rider-Waite-Smith these days, I do read reversals. That's something that has always been kind of on and off for me. With Thoth, I don't ever read reversals for some reason, but now in current modern present practice, I do read reversals with Rider-Waite-Smith. And I don't use this exact deck that much, but occasionally when I'm feeling really sentimental, I do use it. I know some people find these backs hideous, and apparently the colors to some people are atrocious and so yellow. I really don't mind it, and I never have minded it. It's not something that ever affected me or bothered me or made me feel like I needed different versions of this deck at all. This was the only deck I had for like three years, maybe almost close to 4. And I was totally content with it, didn't want anything more, didn't feel at all like I wasn't connecting with it. So that's that. The only other version I think I have of this is now I have the Centennial edition, and it's not like I feel like it's night and day. It's kind of nice with that vintage coloration to it. And I would say the only big thing for me with the Centennial edition is the backs are really nice, and they make me feel a little bit more like I don't know, if they feel more historical, they feel more timeless and classic. Yeah, that was the first deck. And the most recent is the Tarot of the Sevenfold Mystery by Robert M. Place. I got this one this month because I'm reading that big, oh my god, what is the name of it? Like Tarot, Neoplatonism, Hermeticism, Alchemy, that big book that is kind of geared with the alchemical tarot, which I'm now learning and seeing as I'm at the end that most of it is not even really a guidebook for the deck. More than half of it is a history, which I'm really enjoying, so I'm not at all displeased with that. But it's also, it references this deck heavily, and while it's a guidebook for the alchemical tarot, I didn't even realize that book referenced this deck and was almost a guidebook to this deck just as much as it was to the alchemical tarot. And this, I think, recently came back into print as a second edition, and so I got it, and I really enjoy it. I think it's a beautiful deck. I'll just show, I don't know, this may be something that a lot of people have already seen, so you may be very familiar with these images, I'm not sure, but These are the backs, which I think is really pretty. I love Robert M. Place's art style. I love the thought that goes into these decks, and the meaning in every symbol and the historical significance in certain mythos and traditions, and how they've evolved and culminated. And so I find all of that to be so fascinating and interesting. So to me, this is a wonderful, wonderful deck, and I'm really enjoying it. It's a nice purchase. So the next question is, has my art style changed? I would say yes. Meanwhile, I just showed you a deck that has has scenes and very real looking people in them, which is so not what I would consider my art style, but I do have a soft spot for Robert M. Place's work, so that deck aside, I would say that my art style now is much more... I actually don't like decks as much, I'm finding, that have people in them. By people, I don't necessarily mean figures. I don't necessarily like to see people that look like any person that I would see in the world. I like beings, people that are maybe like these wispy, very inhuman looking figures. For example, the Thoth Tarot is a perfect example of the type of deck and art style I like. It's abstract. There's not necessarily scenes, or at least not real life looking scenes going on. The people in them are not really people, they're beings. They're all sorts of different colors, their proportions are very wild, they look like they're just from this other higher world that's beyond a different dimension, or a different state of being that's like astral or something. So I really enjoy decks that don't have just normal looking people with normal looking scenes that we would see. I'm not enjoying that as much recently. In the past year or so, I'm finding in a lot of the decks that I now have and frequently use reflect that. The Tarot of the Spirit is a really great example as well. I like nature-based decks, so I'm fine, I think, more so when I see things that I'm fine with animals that look somewhat realistic. I'm fine with very natural scenes that are devoid of human influence. I'm okay with those looking very realistic, but when it turns into, say, scenes with human creations and figures that look very much like actual humans, I'm not as called to that art anymore. So I like the abstract, I like the difference, I like things that feel a little bit out of this world. They don't necessarily need to be fantasy. And then, of course, nature and animal decks are ones that I think I've always enjoyed and continue to enjoy. But that's just, I guess, how I would define my taste now, if that makes any sense. So next we have, has the way you do spreads changed? Yes. I would say in the beginning I was one to seek out spreads from books and online, and perform those. I didn't really feel capable of creating my own spreads. I also think that during those times, my first few years, I didn't feel as called to use spreads at all. I would just lay cards down on a given topic, or not really have anything in mind and lay cards down. I would kind of really go for those simple past, present, future spreads, or I would just kind of, like lay cards down on a topic and then try to formulate and make something out of the formlessness of what it is that I just put down on the table. So that was something I used to do a lot more. I would say I tend to go for spreads more today, more in the current sense than I did in the past. I definitely find myself performing readings for myself and others where there is no spread, so that's not to say that I don't, but I like to come up with my own spreads. Actually, I feel like I really enjoy spread design. I enjoy having something or feeling something and then trying to, I would say, encapsulate that feeling and have it depicted through a spread, or have a need that I need to have fulfilled or guidance, and then creating a spread that is going to help me to get to that point or to understand something. So for me, spread design has become a big way, a big form of expression, and it's something that I've found really valuable in my professional practice. A lot of, and most of the spreads that I'll do for clients are ones that I've come up with, and I have a big document where I have all of my spreads, that I've created with all of my spreads. And I like to come up with custom spreads when clients want custom readings, and I find that that's really, really fun. For example, to have an inquiry that is very unique from a client, and then for me to kind of sit with what it is that they've asked and create a spread for them. and I feel just like, I don't know, that's so fun for me. It's part of the, it kind of just adds to the nuance and creative element that tarot is can entail for me. And so that's where I'm at in terms of spreads and the way that they've changed for me, going from more simple spreads and also ones that I would say are more just like popularized in books and also just kind of laying cards down, to now more so using spreads of my own creation, and that kind of adding to the complexity and the reading process. So that's where I'm at. Last question is, has the system you use changed? And anybody who's watched my channel for any amount of time will probably know, yes, that's a big, emphatic yes. It's changed from the Rider-Waite-Smith to the Thoth, and I don't see that changing anytime soon, as in, I think I'm going to stick with the Thoth. It's just, it feels like home. It feels very natural. I get feelings from it that I wish I got in the beginning from the Rider-Waite-Smith, and I feel like my journey would have kind of exploded and been more heightened and interesting if I'd fallen into the Thoth. But at the same time, if I had started with the Thoth, maybe it wouldn't have felt the same, and having discovered it now, it just feels so right. The art style feels right. There's something that feels very universal. It feels like there's so much to unearth. It feels complex and rich, and I don't know, there's just something about it. It feels like, I can see myself in it more. I don't know. There's just more to it, and I find that the readings that I do with it are, they're just better for the most part. I won't say every time consistently, but I would say by and large, and I think that that's also a reflection of how it is that I feel about the deck, kind of manifesting in the results of a reading. And to me, the Thoth is just, it's perfect for me. And so, yes, my system has changed. I've dabbled in Marseille, which was kind of in between the Rider-Waite-Smith and the Thoth stage that I'm currently inhabiting, and I couldn't get into it. I read up on it a bit and practiced it. I have a Marseille deck or two, and I think it's a great system, but I don't know, I don't feel called to it in the same way, and so that's probably the system that I interact with the least. Who knows, maybe that'll change, but for me it's definitely been a very, very massive upheaval and shift from the Rider-Waite-Smith over to the Thoth, and I am firmly planted in Thothland and don't see myself deviating from that so much so anytime soon. So that is that. Now that brings us, I think, to the end of the questions. So yeah, that was a little synopsis of my tarot journey. I know that how has your tarot journey evolved question really kind of took over a major portion of this video, but that's really, I think, the question that lends itself to the narrative aspect, which, yeah, so I told that story. Yeah, that's it. So if you enjoyed this, like and subscribe. I'm sure that I may have watched your version of this if you've done one, because I've watched a bunch of these, but if not, let me know and I'll check it out, because I am so curious to know about my fellow people in the tarot community and their journeys. So yeah, that's really wonderful that we get to kind of all share this aspect of ourselves and a little bit of our history. So I hope you are all well. Until next time, bye.